Welcome to the Boardroom Podcast, presented by the Political Action Committee, People for a Better DeSoto County, with your hosts, Chad and Ben. We hope to give you an informative look into local government by having a healthy discussion about city issues, interview a few friends, and have a little fun.
Hey, welcome to the Boardroom Podcast. I'm Ward 6 Alderman Ben Piper.
And I'm Ward 4 Alderman Chad Wicker in Shelby Row Production Studios in downtown Hernando.
On Caffey Street here in downtown Hernando. We appreciate you joining up with us today for today's ninth episode. We're almost done with season number 1.
Yeah.
Our guest speaker for this week will be Derrick Michaud.
Yeah, we got a little curveball. We're going to have the sheriff candidates on and a couple scheduling conflicts, so we'll have them on in 2 weeks. So we're going to have our producer here, Derrick, is going to have a Q&A with us about municipal government in general and some of the questions that he thinks kind of basic municipal questions.
Yeah, more about the job of an alderman. It's a really great interview I had. So let's dive into our meeting that we had, the first meeting of June with the Board of Aldermen.
Yeah, I thought a very productive meeting, Ben. It was about hour and a half, something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff on the consent agenda. I've posted this on our Facebook page, the Boardroom Podcast. Going to talk about a few of the issues. First, we heard from our Parks Director, who has recommended to us that we hire a turf supervisor. Ben, you want to talk about that a little bit and what that's going to do for us?
Yeah, Jared Barkley, our Parks Director. Ultimately, what it comes down to is when the city, he felt, needed a turf supervisor, somebody that really had kind of an education in like sports turf,
how fields drain,
to be able to come in and say, look, let's get everything we can out of the fields that we have. The city has purchased the Civic Center ball fields, voted on that measure, had it passed through. What can we do to better these fields? What about our soccer fields? Our soccer fields have some damp spots. Over at Kirkendall Fitness Park, there's a football field that's got some bare spots in it. What can we do? Is it just something where we're going to have to scrape everything and start over, scrap all these fields, or are there some new techniques? Are there some new things that we can do to kind of salvage these fields or put some things into them to make them work?
Absolutely.
And that's not necessarily for every park. Each one's going to be different. Each one's going to be unique.
Yeah, that was a recommendation of a consultant that we're kind of in partnership with to just improve. The ultimate goal is to make our parks department the best we can within our budget, and so that's what we're working to do. I think it's a great hire, and looking forward to getting somebody on board and hearing what they have to say about some of our fields.
So parents, if you've ever had a rain out, we are putting resources towards trying to mitigate that as much as possible. And so, we can't control the weather, unfortunately, just yet. We don't have that kind of power and influence just yet. But what we can do is put more resources towards it.
Absolutely. And I coached the 5-year-old baseball this year, and we only had one rain out all year. So that field 5 we played on really held up good this year up on the top there.
Yeah, I think they're in the best shape they've been in a while. I think most of the sports fields are. The soccer fields at one end stay pretty wet and muddy, but I think it's just going to be something we got to figure it out.
All right. Kind of next topic we'll talk about quickly is our discussion about the budget. This was something that was added. I think a couple of the aldermen had met with the mayor and recommended putting a discussion about our budget, start getting that in place so we can start looking at revenue, looking at some of the needs and wants from the department heads, and something that I think we've never had done before, I think is what Mr. Miller said, is actually have a time frame in place to go with the budget. Isn't that right, Ben?
Yeah, I talked with some of the other former aldermen who had served the city previously, and they said they tried to put some kind of budget timeline or budget procedure together in the past, but it was never really fully agreed to by the board. So myself and Alderwoman Lynch, we thought it to be a priority to really just explain the board's priorities and where we want to be, so that when the department heads come in, one, they kind of understand, well, this is where the board is kind of wanting to go, so that there's not there's not a misunderstanding on the back end where it comes time to vote for the budget or vote against the budget, and you have to vote against it because of a few line items that you wouldn't have agreed upon from the get-go. So let's just get it all out in the open right from the start and say, listen, let's one of the priorities, I think everybody wants to have a larger rainy day fund and be working towards a larger rainy day fund. I think the mayor made it pretty clear that payroll was one thing he wanted to take a really close look at. I don't know about that as much, That's going to be something we have to hammer out with department heads and understand. But to me, I feel like we got to get to where we have 10% of our budget saved up, as kind of a contingency or rainy day fund, and we are maybe about 5% currently. So, a little bit of ways to go.
And the Mississippi state law makes us, two things that we have to remember. One is that our budget has to be balanced, and two, we have to have it done by September 15th. And sometimes, because of nobody's fault, but sometimes that process is rushed, and so we're trying to get ahead of it, trying to get our revenue numbers, our kind of if department heads, like you said, want to add headcount, or if they want to give somebody a pay raise and so forth, we can kind of start working through those numbers to get a good working budget together and start adding or subtracting based on the priorities of the board and the mayor. One of the priorities for me that I brought up at the meeting is the parks. We have now purchased the Hernando Civic Center from those clubs, and I really would like to invest out there, and maybe start working on a new concession stand or whatever the majority of the board agrees to. But I think that's something we have to look at. And of course, I'd like to see a continued investment in our infrastructure, paving on our roads, different projects like that. I know that's everybody probably agrees on that issue. We're kind of behind the times on that, and we're trying to get caught up. So that's just my thoughts on it. Ben, anything else you want to add before we move on?
Yeah, that was the other, and the number that I threw out there for infrastructure was $2.5 million. This year we did 1.9 on neighborhood streets. There were some larger projects that were paid for with grants or matching funds or whatever else. But for this next year, I'd really like to see us at that 2.5 number just to get more caught up on city streets. And one thing that caught us by surprise our first budget year, I think we budgeted $1.2 million for street paving, is that the cost of gas and the cost of oil skyrocketed in that first year, and it severely hampered how much work we could actually do. So kind of learning from your past, maybe budget more than what you think you're going to need, and then if gas and oil prices do happen to fall, which I don't think that's in the cards, given
it's election year next year, so
economic conditions. Well, maybe it might happen. But let's say it does fall. Well, then you can either pave more than what you thought you could, or you can put it back into the contingency fund that we're trying to build up. And that's just kind of common sense budgeting that I can get behind. So so the big thing with the budget timeline, like we were telling people, department heads have to have all their information back to City Hall by June the 16th. Sometime in July, we should get budget projections for
the biggest thing is the tax assessor Jeff Fitch, who we've had on the program in the past. I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that episode if you haven't. He's going to give us the kind of preliminary numbers of what our residential ad valorem tax, property taxes are going to be. So that's when people have paid their property taxes or anticipate and pay their property taxes in January. That we'll get that number, so we notice that's going to be the biggest chunk of our revenue, essentially, that and sales tax. And
sales tax, it should be around 5.3.
Yeah, I've been tracking that. We've had some decent
like
numbers there. It's not a 10%. I think we were thinking maybe a little more, but it's encouraging.
Yeah. So those are the two big numbers, and those are something that you kind of work off of as we're putting the budget together. But the public hearings will be held in August, and then has to be voted on by September 15th. So we've got that budget timeline put in place. Part of it is based on state statutes, and then part of it is based on our.
We have to set our millage rate, which is a tax rate, and put that. And that's going to be around the paper for a period of time. So those timelines get really complex and kind of run on each other there towards the end. So we're trying to get ahead of that, and I think I appreciate everybody for doing that, the mayor and all the aldermen and there was no issue with doing that, so that's great. Ben, I guess the last thing, big issue we're going to talk about from this meeting on June 6th was the discussion of some of the ARPA projects that we talked about. So just to I guess inform everybody, ARPA was was American Rescue Plan or whatever. I can't remember what that.
American Recovery Plan Act.
Yeah, and so the state got some money, the city's got some money, the county's got some money, and so it only could be used for water and sewer. And so we outlined, I think, 5 or 6 infrastructure projects and put our money up for that. And then the state last year, the money they got, they kind of matched what we had. So it's kind of a bang for our buck kind of deal. One of the big issues that we talked about at the meeting was the Green Tea Sewer project was funded through the ARPA. We put in applications for these 5 or 6 projects.
And you don't when you put in for these matches, you don't know if you're going to get them or not. So I think the strategy was to put in all of the projects that we were thinking about, and then all of them got matched. So we were approximately $1.9 million overmatched. So what it came down to is there were 2 projects that could possibly be taken off the ARPA match list and would have to be there would have to be money borrowed to deal with them. One was the Green Tea Sewer project, which is in an annexed portion of the city, annexed 15 years ago, does not have sewer, and would have to be, it was about $1.84 million or $1.86 million. Or we have a Byhalia Road water plant and a Madison Lakes elevated tank, which comes at close to $2 million, $1.988.
Yeah, that's the city's part. Then the state's matching the other part of it. So
yes,
that's half of what it would cost. And,
yes.
and those are just estimates. That's something too we need to remember as well.
Correct. So one of those projects would have to be was going to have to be cut off the list and then money borrowed to cover it, or maybe just not funded at all. And so that was kind of what the debate was over, in my opinion. The Byhalia Road water plant, Madison Lakes elevated tank, is more of an economic development play.
Absolutely.
To build more homes and businesses in that area. And the Green Tea one, to me, was a legal responsibility by the city when they annexed people in to extend sewer to those folks. And ultimately, that item was taken off the list. The Green Tea was taken off the list, and I guess a loan is going to be procured for it.
Well, the hope is that the city has applied for what they call a STAG grant the last 2 or 3 years. I think we haven't gotten that in the past, but we feel a little better about it this year. But I think it's still kind of a coin flip, 50-50 chance. And what that is that's a federal funded grant to pay for that cost of that. So if we do get the grant, the STAG grant, that project will be included. If we don't get the project, I think from hearing the discussion at the meeting from Alderman Miller and Alderman Robinson, they want to try to get a CAP loan or capital improvement loan to pay for that project.
The majority of the board decided to approve that plan. I just felt that we needed to go ahead and take care of Green Tea Sewer since it was already funded, and then we could look at the Byhalia water plant, Madison Lakes elevated tank at a later date. I don't think the drawings for it have been completed, or any of the the engineering work hadn't been completed on it yet. I know that we just tapped for a water well, I think, over there in the last month or so.
Yeah, that's further down to get well.
Of it. So it's one of those things where we just everybody didn't necessarily agree, and that's okay. Things like that happen, but it's still moving. It's moving forward there. So we wait to see. Probably around October or so, we should have information on that STAG grant.
We'll have an idea for sure,
and we'll go from there. So the other projects on there, there's a Jaybird water plant that increases the capacity on the east side of town.
Yeah, I think that's already being worked on or done.
That one's the work's already going on there. There's a downtown sewer project to kind of replace some of the older.
That's where we're going to smoke the sewers and see where we have leaks, infiltration, where water's infiltrating to the sewer. And then there's East Parkway project and Dogwood Hollow sewer project as well. So altogether, when you look at all these things, it's a little over $4 million that ARPA created for the city of Hernando, and then it was matched by $4 million. Yeah,
so
from the state with their funds.
So a total investment and commitment of over $8 million in federal funds for the city of Hernando. So certainly these are things that we would not have been able to tackle just with our budget. I mean, our total all-encompassing budget is $35 million or so annually. So $8 million is a really huge injection of federal funds to be able to do this. So we will have to see how quickly these projects can be knocked out. And most of them have been drawn and engineered and ready to go. So they're shovel-ready projects. Yeah,
and I think there's a timeline on when they have to be completed for the ARPA funds. I think it's Mike Foster, which is the gentleman with Pickering Engineering that helped us. He I think it's 2026 they have to be completed or showing almost completed. So
that's it.
So you'll start seeing some of those. I think the Jaybird water plant is getting pretty close to being done, I think.
Yeah. And another thing with these ARPA, because a lot of times any kind of federal matching or anything like that, there's always rules that apply to it. So you could spend these funds however. You could spend them on other things. I think there were some cities that wanted to spend them on parks or wanted to spend them on, something else, but you wouldn't have been eligible for that state match. So that was really why we tried to get as much bang for our buck as we possibly could.
Yeah, I think we did the right thing in getting the money doubled essentially. I think the lieutenant governor was involved in that, and the state senate and state legislature to getting that passed. Ben, I think that's really all we got.
Now we'll be moving on to our interview portion. Well, we're going to be the interviewees, I guess. We're bringing on our guest, Derrick Michaud, producer of the Boardroom podcast, another podcast here in Hernando, and he is going to ask us several burning questions, I guess, about what you do as an alderman.
He's been bugging me for months about these questions.
Yeah,
he just wants to be on the mic. He likes being on the mic.
He's got it. He's ready. He's ready to fire off. So let's bring him on now.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. This is the Boardroom Podcast with Ward 4 Alderman Chad Wicker.
And Ward 6 Alderman Ben Piper. And we've got our guest for this week. It's Derrick Michaud, who has...
Where'd you find him at?
He was nearby.
Okay.
He was nearby.
Struggling for guests, man.
Nah. Well, so we have Derrick on this week to kind of do something a little bit different. You know, this has been kind of an educational journey, I think, for a lot of people that listen to this podcast, but especially for Derrick, I think somebody that's not from Mississippi originally, I'm not either, but, you know, he just has a genuine interest in government and kind of how it operates and, you know, what these jobs all do. So we decided for an episode, what we would do is allow Derrick to sort of just fire away with some questions that he has for just...
I guess we need to introduce Derrick so people know who he is.
I mean, we need to know that I'm the award-winning producer of this show.
So we're always live from the Caffey Place building. Is that right? In the heart of Ward 4, the beating heart of Hernando. It's Shelby Rowe Productions, and Derrick is our elaborate, award-winning producer of our program here, among other podcasts. The Real Hernando, and I think you're doing something. Caffey, what's the one?
Caffey and Commerce is coming.
Yeah, with the
it's a business spotlight podcast.
Sure.
Yeah.
So he's got a lot of other great things coming up. So he mentioned this idea to us when we first started, maybe asking some questions, because again, this whole thing is try to just educate people and get information out to people and let them make the best decisions. And we know we have some state elections and other things coming up, and so let's talk some questions about aldermen and city government and maybe even a little state government, and we'll try to answer the best we can. I
won't put you on the spot too much, but it's been fun working with you guys, and for sure. Anyone that doesn't have context, when Chad and Ben do their interviews, I'm literally sitting 3 feet from the table working on my desk. So I've got to hear a lot of cool conversations in here. So, and I'm glad we get to do this today. So let's start with, you mentioned this earlier, Chad, and let's hear more about it.
Okay.
The genesis of the name and the term alderman. What is that all about?
So my understanding is Mississippi, when they redid their constitution in 1892 and did what they call the code charter, which is the municipal form of government that Hernando has, and I think the majority of the cities, which is a weak mayor system and a strong alderman system. They stole the name from Chicago because that's what Chicago calls their city councilmen or aldermen. And so that's where the term came from my understanding. And that's where a majority of the forms of government at the municipal level in Mississippi is code charter, which again is when I say weak mayor, that means the mayor really doesn't have a lot of executive authority without the approval of a majority of the aldermen. So
yeah, I had that on my list, the role of mayor. So what's the term? It's a weak mayor?
So we have what we call a weak mayor system. So like if we want to hire someone or fire someone, it has to be approved by a majority of the Board of Aldermen. The mayor can't do that unilaterally. They have to have the permission of the alderman.
Every expense has to be approved.
Yes.
So sometimes people will hear, we were voting on the docket of claims. Well, all that is every purchase order or PO, it's a huge stack, that we go through when we get our packet on Friday for a Tuesday meeting. It's all the purchases. So you might see, the local hardware store on there. You might see the Gateway Tire or Bryant Tire or whatever else.
Light bill, water bill.
People getting things like that done. Payroll, insurance, all those purchases. But they have to be approved by the board. If the board said, we'll approve all of them except for this one because we don't feel like it's appropriate or it wasn't bid out properly or whatever the reason is, you can pull those expenses out. But anything that is purchased by the city the mayor can give the authority, okay, go purchase this, but it has to ultimately be approved by the Board of Aldermen.
Wow. So everything, all these item lines?
Absolutely. And there's some state purchasing laws as far as the cost of something. So anything, it recently changed to $75,000. Anything that's more than that has to be bid out through a formal bidding process. Anything under that and more than $5,000 has to have two competitive quotes. So a lot of times, say for instance, the police department wants to buy a car that's $35,000. As long as they get two quotes now, they can do that, and they'll go ahead and purchase the car with a purchase order, and then that claim docket will be approved at whatever the next meeting is. So technically, I guess we could deny that claim, and then they'd have to get the car back. I guess that rarely happens, because as long as it's within their budget and so forth, it's not an issue.
So you guys only meet every other Tuesday, right?
So by state or by our code, we have to meet once a month, but we've always met twice a month. I think since Andrew Miller said that at one time they met once a month, and the meetings were lasting like 6 or 7 hours because it was a lot of claims and a lot of things to address. So they went to the two. I think he told me in 96 or 97, something like that. I may be wrong on that, but that's Andrew. He's my historian on the board because he's been there since on and off since like 1987.
So I've always wondered what alderman at large means, and our current alderman at large is Doc Harris, correct?
It means the oldest one on the board.
I hope he's listening.
So your alderman at large is a citywide elected position. So where in Hernando we have 6 wards, it's divided evenly by population, 1 man, 1 vote on that. But Doc Harris currently, or our alderman at large, represents the entire city. So let's say you had 3 wards that voted one way and 3 wards that voted another way on an issue. That role is tasked with considering what's good for the entire city, right? What's the best thing for the entire city? Whereas, each one of us on the board, we're more tasked with, what do you think my constituency in my part of town would want, and that's what you're there to do.
So he's kind of the tiebreaker in a way?
In a way. I think that's always been my opinion on how it's structured.
Well, so again, this is kind of a history lesson. At one time, all the aldermen were at large, which means they were elected by the entire city, not just a particular ward. Okay.
Gotcha.
If you do it at large like that, that really influences your minority populations. And so, say like Hernando is a town whose minority population is
13%,
14% or whatever. And so, if you have everybody's voted from the majority of the town, you're not going to have majority population is not going to be well represented, and so the Voting Rights Act of '65 ensures it's 1 man, 1 vote, and so I think because at one time, I think this was in the '80s, all 4 of the aldermen, or 3 of the 4 aldermen that we had were all lived like within a mile of each other. So it really wasn't fair to some of the other people.
Sure, they're not representing an area they actually live in, right?
Well, they're representing the entire city, but they're not a full representation of the entire population of a city in whole. Does that make sense?
Yes,
So if you have aldermen at large, they're being voted on by the entire population of the city. Where like Ben is only the people that live in Ward 6 are voting for Ben. So if that population may have a high minority population, then you may have a better chance of getting a minority elected there, right?
Gotcha.
So and that's just the way. That's a more fair and accurate way to elect people. Ben, you got to clean that up for me. You're a lot more well spoken than me. So.
Well, yeah. I think if you look at the board currently, you have like this cross section of people that are, you have retirees, you have people that are in their 30s and their 40s and their 50s and their 60s and their 70s. Like it's really a cross section of the community. You have 7 aldermen. We have 1 African American alderman, Andrew Miller. Well,
2 females.
Yeah, one out of 7 is like about 15%. So
that makes sense.
In a way, it is very representative of like the census data that you would see for Hernando. It's people of a lot of different age groups and that sort of thing. And to be an alderman, you only have to be 18 years old. That's pretty much and live in the city.
Qualified elector, which means you are registered to vote.
That's it.
I don't think you can. I don't think you'd be convicted of a felony. I can't remember.
Well, you got to be a qualified elector. So I think if you're convicted of a felon, you're not able.
So I could run to be alderman?
Yes. There's no educational requirement.
Absolutely, you can.
There's no any kind of,
we prefer people to go to Ole Miss. So.
I'm still trying to figure out how everyone votes. That's this is the last thing I need to be.
So, and another thing we have to remember is that when you're in what I call the DeSoto County bubble, right? We have a population like Hernando's the smallest city of 17,000.
Right.
A lot of people don't realize that puts us in the top 20 in the state of Mississippi in population. Mm-hmm. So the vast majority of cities and municipalities in Mississippi are less than 5,000, like 80% of them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so most of these smaller cities, it doesn't make sense to have wards because the population's so small. So you have aldermen at large for the entire area. Like, I think the closest Como, those kinds of cities, they just have an alderman at large because you're talking about maybe a population of 2,000 or 3,000 people.
Like Byhalia would be an example of that?
Yeah, so some of these people are being elected at alderman at large in an entire city that has less the registered voters in Ward 6 or Ward 4 does in Hernando because we are such a large area. Like the city of South Haven, they're a city of 70,000 now, something like that. So, and they have the same amount of aldermen as we do, so that alderman is representing a lot of people.
I was just going to ask that. So for some place like Byhalia, are they still going to have the same amount?
I'm not sure if they have the code charter or not. I think they do, and if they do, they're going to have 4 aldermen and 1 alderman at large.
Okay.
So they're going to have 5 board members and a mayor.
Yeah, of course, you always need the odd number.
Yes. If there and there have been, I think, only maybe a couple of occurrences where we've had a tied vote because somebody was out of pocket or something like that.
Typically if somebody's not there and
then
somebody recuses himself maybe or something.
And then
like
the mayor does have to cast a vote to break a tie.
That's really some of the only executive power he has is when it's a tie, he can break the tie.
But definitely very unusual. I think it's only happened like once or twice in the 2 years we've been serving.
What else you got?
So let's tap into the audience members out there that are more like me and civically challenged, we'll say. So let's going to get super basic. How does voting work as an alderman?
Are you talking about like the vote we take?
Well, okay. So when I go to when I went to the board meetings, and I've just recently joined the chamber board, so I'm just learning firsthand how this kind of voting works, and it was neat to see a lot of similarities. But just explain how the voting works at the board meetings.
So the mayor is the presiding officer of the meeting, so he kind of manages the meeting. He can call a vote, and typically we do all in favor say aye, all opposed no, because most issues are not controversial. But sometimes on a controversial issue, or somebody can ask for a roll call vote. So that's when everybody, one at a time, the clerk will call, Alderman Piper, Alderman Wicker, Alderman Lynch, and we would say yay or nay.
So you're able to vote aye or nay, yes or no. You can also vote present and basically not, and basically pull yourself out from the vote, or you can abstain from the vote. But one thing about that is while you may say present or abstain or whatever else, I think that while it's recorded that way in the minutes is basically going with whatever the majority.
Right. So we got stuck with the police chief one time because one alderman was not there and one alderman voted present, and it was a tie and the mayor broke the tie. And so that's sometimes on maybe a controversial issue or something they don't want to vote yay or nay on, they vote present. And Ben mentioned something very important, the minutes. So when he's talking about the clerk records the minutes of the meeting, and that's the official record of that meeting. And
then you vote on it, like accepting them or moving on.
Yes, and so once the minutes are approved, in every meeting we approve the minutes from the previous meeting. And so that's kind of our official record. So we can go back to when Hernando was first incorporated there, and you're supposed to have the meeting minutes. Yeah. And so from time to time, when something comes up or you'll see a issue, we'll go back and pull the meeting minutes from that meeting, and that kind of tells you how we voted, and it's supposed to have the discussion of it, which is kind of hard to do sometimes. But now since we're recording them, audio and visual, so you can go back and actually watch the meetings on YouTube now from, I think, about the last 3 years.
So when voting on it just solidifies it, puts it in the stone. We all agreed that this is everything we talked about.
Yeah,
and
so
agreed on.
A lot of times what we vote on is approving an action, so approving a hire, approving the mayor to sign a contract, approving the minutes. Most of our, I guess, motions are affirmative motions, I guess you would say, approving an action of some type.
So motion. And again, I learned this in the chamber.
I'm going to get you a Christmas present called the Book of Robert's Rules of Order.
There you go.
That's what I don't know, Ben. I don't know if you did that in college or whatever. They gave us that book as one of our textbooks and
we kind of
class.
We like loosely follow it.
Yeah, you're supposed to. So
we
you're supposed
loosely
to
follow it in our board meetings.
So Robert's Rule of Order is a formal way to conduct a meeting. So that's when you make a motion, aye, yay. That's all. It all lines that out what you're supposed to say. Point of information or point of order. Those are all things from Robert's Rule of Order.
After going to an alderman meeting and being part of the chamber, it seems like it's all following the same system.
Yeah, that's Robert's Rule of Order. So that's what the Congress uses. That's what just about any type of board meeting uses is Robert's Rule of Order.
So motions. So someone sets a motion, puts it out there, kind of, right? If no one speaks up to second that motion, what happens?
I've been there before. It dies.
The motion dies for lack of second.
So in a way, that's kind of everyone else voting, right?
Yes, and then I think some people are, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say this, maybe a little shy to speak up sometimes or whatever, or it's something they may not be that interested in or whatever.
But still, I mean, it's telling if no one wants to step up and say yes. That must be frustrating, right?
Well, sometimes it can happen when
I've been there before a couple times.
Sometimes it can happen when.
One of these days, we'll get Chad to stay on this microphone.
I'm sorry. I didn't go to broadcast journalism school like that.
Sometimes it'll happen when there needs to be more discussion, right? So sometimes it'll die for lack of second, and then there's more discussion, and then there's, the motion can be brought back up, or a different motion can be made.
Can you vote on, hey, let's discuss more of this later?
We can table. That's called tabling it. Tabling something to another meeting.
Okay.
And typically when you have like a lack of a second, it's either a controversial issue or a complex issue that we need to talk about more, more discussion on.
Okay, so now someone throws out the second, and that's when the mayor says, anyone oppose or?
Call for a voice vote, which is all in favor say aye or yay, and all opposed say no, or he can do a roll call vote if somebody asks for it.
Okay, so let's just say he doesn't ask for that, but there is one that opposes. Okay, so then now it breaks down to another level of voting, right? How does that work?
Well, so if he says everybody in favor say yay, and everybody says yay, and then or a couple, because I don't ever, in voice votes I don't ever say anything, so I just my silence is a yes.
Okay.
And so if you ever notice that, I don't know if anybody else does that, but I don't say anything. And then, but if I oppose the motion when he calls for a voice vote and I say no, then I'm opposed to it. I think, Ben, he likes to say no all the time. So he's
yeah, but so when it's thrown out there and then there's someone that opposes, then okay, that just puts a speed bump in it now.
Yeah. So
what's the next step? So now if you say you oppose something, then they give you the floor to explain why. How does that work?
No, I mean, there's certainly times when, we have somebody that'll come in and ask for a rezoning or something like that. They want to change it from agricultural to residential land or something like that. I may say during the discussion, I have issues with this, and this, so it can be, recorded in our minutes. But you don't have to necessarily explain why you voted yes or no on anything. If I'm going to vote against something, I will typically say something to the effect of what I have an issue with.
So what's that next step? You oppose something. What does the mayor do?
So as long as there are 4 votes,
a majority of the board present,
yes.
Majority of the members present.
Yes. As long as there's a majority, then everything that's the end of it. It's done.
So
at that point.
So you oppose. You're the only one. Doesn't matter.
6-1. You move on to the next thing. And so again, there's some cases where you need to have a super majority, which would be 5 votes out of the 7. The list of those would come down to a planning commission votes against a rezoning, and the board decides, well, we're going to go the other direction. It's a 5-2 vote to flip it, and and you have a super majority that flips their decision. That's one of the cases.
Yeah, so most recently we've ran into that a couple times when our planning commission has denied a rezoning or a development, and then it's come, because they are a recommending body. So when they recommend something that comes to us, if they've denied it, it takes a super majority of the members present to pass it. And so we've I guess overturned some of their denials. And a lot of times when we do that, it's because we've had a conversation with the developer and people in that area and come to a resolution that everybody agrees with.
You guys just rezoned, right?
We redistricted the voting wards, yes.
Right. So how long of a process is that?
Well, the previous board took them about 15 years, but it took us about 15 months, huh, Ben? Something like that?
It's a process now because you have to wait for your census data to come in. So you take the census in 2020, and it was
17,135 or something like that.
It was fall or almost winter of 2021 before we had the data, and then we had to hire somebody to help us kind of get through the data and understand where people were exactly and that sort of thing, and then also do the demographic breakdown and some of those things, because you wanted to make sure as part of the redistricting that you didn't. There's another term. It's called gerrymandering.
Yep.
So gerrymandering is when you draw a district in a very unusual way to potentially decrease the amount of influence a certain group has.
Yes.
Right. So
Alabama just had their legislative districts thrown out by the Supreme Court yesterday.
Yeah.
And there's a racial thing attached to that often, right?
Right. So there are certain there's one Ward 2 I think is majority. No.
Ward 2 it has a minority district, but it's that the population is shrinking for sure.
Yeah. And then across the other 5 wards that are out there, it's anywhere from 8 to 13% African American, and it just sort of depends on what part of town it is. But
so historically, what I think Ben's trying to say, historically, our minority population or the black voters lived in what was called the West End, or the
right.
I guess that's the southwest part of town there, that's what I think the majority of them lived at one time. But now I think Hernando's a lot more diverse city, so they don't just live in one particular. That population doesn't live in just one particular area. They live throughout the city very diversely. Mm-hmm. So it kind of dilutes their voting power, if that makes sense, because you don't have. Help me understand, Ben. You don't have 60% of Ward 2 is minority. You may have now it's 40%, and the other ones have moved throughout the city. So it's
balancing out more.
So everybody has a constitutional right to have what they call one vote, one man, one vote. So if District 2 has 2,000 people in it, you want the other districts to have a very similar amount of people. Mm-hmm. So that way our vote on the board is representative of of the number of people. And so what happened in the city of Hernando was they redistricted, I think last in 2009, I think, before the 2010 census, they redistricted off the 2009 numbers, and so that really got out of balance. And that, I don't know if you remember this before we were doing the podcast, but right before our election in 2021, the city redistricted the districts to make it more fair for the election we had in 2021.
Mm-hmm. It was fascinating at that board meeting. I was there for that presentation.
Yeah, so when we came in office, that was kind of a priority for because we had dealt with that in the past. Because Ben used to live in Ward 3, and when they redistricted, he went to Ward 6. So he ran for a complete different office.
Because you have to represent where you live.
You have to live in your ward for 2 years. So that was a priority on our list to get done as soon as possible. So we got our numbers back, and we got with the consultant, and he helped us draw up the districts.
It was super interesting to see that presentation.
Well, it's also it's important, for folks listening to fill out your census. Like, it's important to be a part of the census because it means that, one, it makes the numbers more accurate, right? But it's also important because it means that the people who, represent you at the local level, to the state level, just as high up as the levels of government goes, it's going to be more accurate. The more the states that have the most, the states that end up with the most representation are the ones that have the highest population. So you want to make sure that those numbers are as accurate as possible. And I think that there was counties. DeSoto County did really well in the census. I think it was around about a 63 or 65% participation rate. But there were other counties in Mississippi that were, in the 30s and 40s. Yeah. So I mean, there's thousands and thousands of people out there that aren't being counted, and it happens every time.
And that population number is tied into the amount of federal funding you get for whatever program, the type of grants you can apply for. Our population came back a little over 17,000 people, and I think I don't think this is everybody's opinion, but I think the number was very low because if you can remember what was going on in 2020 when they were doing the numbers, you had a thing called COVID, and so a lot of people didn't answer the door, a lot of people didn't return the mail, and so. Because we were really thinking that we would get over that 20,000 mark with our population. At least I thought we were close to that, and we came back at 17,000, which is kind of low, we think.
And you can't guarantee either number, right?
Because you got to go. You have to go with the 17,000 because that's
right.
officially what it is. But I think that number's low because of the issues that Ben were talking about. People didn't participate. People didn't answer the door. People didn't. I think I did mine online, but there were several different ways you can do it, and people just. Some people just don't want to do with the government and don't want to mess with it.
Sure.
So.
I mean, no census has been 100%.
Right.
No.
So clearly it's going to be more than the number you get, but that's all you have to work with.
They've been doing the census since we've been a country, and I think originally people just go out there and you sign a book or whatever. I think so. Well, you can go back and look at some of those.
I think they used to hold them like in churches, and they would literally be like, everybody raise your hand, and they would count all the hands in the room. At local, because that was like the most central place in a lot of small towns. Is you would meet in the church, everybody raise their hand, you count everybody. There was no like, all right, make sure Bill doesn't like come back in the room again or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't know how that all worked back then, but yeah, we've definitely taken a lot of leaps as far as how the counting measures go. But people also don't want to participate in it.
But that number's important because that tells us how many police officers we need, how many firemen we need. And to help, these restaurants, they count rooftops, and they want to know when they want to put a, Ben's on that Chick-fil-A committee. They hadn't met in a while, but
can we move on that?
It's all quiet. It's all quiet on the Chick-fil-A.
Who's on the Mexican restaurant committee?
I am on that one. Anything productive, I get it done. I'm not.
We got plenty of those. We're in good shape.
No. Anyway, but all those restaurants they have a model, and if you have so many rooftops and your population meets it, and they'll do traffic counts in front of a road to see how many people drive them down the road, and that all factors into what these guys do. What we get in our city, how many police officers we have, how many state representatives we have representing us in the state Senate, federal Senate. House of Representatives. Mississippi in a whole, I think, lost 1% population, so if we continue to lose population, we may lose a House seat. We have 4 right now. We may go to 3 if we continue to lose. So, and if you cut out DeSoto County and you cut out the coast, the population of Mississippi is really drastically declining.
Yeah, DeSoto is the one that's
DeSoto and the coast is keeping it together.
I gotcha. North and south ends.
Yeah.
So we don't want to go too long here, but when do you guys have to run again?
2025.
So
4-year term. It started in 2021.
So we took office July 1st, 2021. So we're coming up on 2 years.
And you guys came in together?
Yeah, he always follows me around. I'm just kidding. No.
Well, that's why you're sitting in the producer's seat.
That's right. That's right. No, so we will. You have to declare for office by February 1st of 2025. So you have
something like that. Maybe March.
Maybe in March. I can't remember what the day is. So the first of 2025, you have I think it's 30 or 60, 90 days or whatever to declare for office, and then the primary election will be in April, and the general election will be in June, and then we would take office again on July 1st of 2025.
Gotcha.
And that'd be the mayor and the 7 aldermen.
So when do you guys start campaigning?
Oh, wow.
Well, I got to talk to my wife and make sure she's going to let me run again. She doesn't like this.
Yeah, I've heard. I had there was somebody I knew that was a supervisor in Itawamba County, which is northeast Mississippi, and he served as a county supervisor, and he said, well, I ran for it and got elected, and then I ran from it the next time because he said it was just more than what he wanted to deal with. And there's certainly days, there's good days and bad days, just like any job, right? And there's
absolutely,
there's times you get bad news, and there's times that you may make a decision and you look back on it 6 months later and say, well, I don't, if I had to do that again, I think I might have done it differently, So you want to try to stand by your decisions as best you can, and it's all based on the information that you have. If you have good information, you can make good decisions. If you don't have good information, you don't make good decisions. It's tough to make a good decision.
I think Ben's probably very similar vein as me. I did this not for notoriety or not to have a podcast. I did it because I want to see my community do better, and I have some goals for our community, and increasing our park program, increasing our infrastructure, things like that. And so, if I think I can still work towards those goals, if we're not there yet, I may seek another term. I don't know. It's still 2 years down the road. So,
well, I love how you understand podcasting, though, and you have brought it in. You too brought it into the fold. I think it's great.
I would dare you to say we're probably the only sitting alderman to have a podcast in Mississippi.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but I'd be interested. I'd be interested to hear how that works.
Well, you're doing this in a studio in a podcast agency that is very differentiated from its marketplace.
Growing.
But I mean, there's no one else doing it.
Yeah.
So,
well, I like the medium. I listen to the podcast. I'm a runner and I work out. I always have a podcast player.
Right.
I have about 10 or different ones in my little queue that I listen to. The Real Hardnando podcast is a good one. I listened to that one with the band director the other day.
Yeah, Joseph Quinley.
That's right.
Everybody.
So I have some national politics, state politics, sports podcast. I listen to the Ole Miss podcast some. So I think it's a great medium. Get your message out there, and I think it's slowly taking over the market away from radio. I think.
Oh, there's definitely benefits I could talk about, but look, I appreciate y'all doing this. This is something I threw out there a while ago, and
what else you got? Any more tough questions?
Oh, you guys want to keep going?
Let's do one more.
What am I missing?
Let's do one more.
What am I missing? Like that, a newbie like myself would probably need to know. Let's pretend I want to run tomorrow or something wacky like that.
Well, I think the most important thing, and I did this, last time around, is when you're campaigning, is the most important thing is to talk to people, talk to as many people as you can, and it gets harder once you are serving as an alderman, because you've got a lot of responsibilities, you've got a lot of phone calls, but going door to door and meeting people and meeting them on the front porch and talking to them, that's what I did, and learned a lot about Hernando through that. Learned a lot about the people who live here and kind of what their values are, and you just try to do your best job to represent those values when you're voting and doing the job.
Do they all have your cell phone number?
I did send my cell phone number out to every single registered voter in Ward 6.
I mean, our mayor has his on his Facebook page, so I would gather, you're representing your ward, so if someone has a complaint about a pothole or something,
right,
in your ward, Ben, they call you, right?
I get calls about it. Earlier today I spoke with somebody that's got an issue with how water's draining off a construction site, up in Nesbitt area, and he got my phone number from something that we sent out to him or whatever we did. So that's kind of how it works, and that's how you're held accountable as an elected official. Is if somebody has an issue with whether it was a vote that I made or there's a vote that's upcoming, like, I certainly want to hear from them, because that's the only way to really know is to hear from as many people as possible. And when we do have controversial votes, you may get 25, 30 phone calls about it with people weighing in one way or another. It's a lot of talking, and but more importantly, it's a lot of listening and just kind of hearing people out. Because I think the biggest thing now, like, we're in this age of communication, we've never been more connected than we have been before, and people still don't feel heard. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that's one of the biggest things. People, I just don't feel heard. My voice isn't heard. I need to get my voice out there. And it's like, there's a million ways to do it. And it's just because I think sometimes when people want to be heard, they want to be agreed with more than anything else. And sometimes it's just like, look, I may listen to you and hear everything that you're saying, but we just can't agree on this one thing. And that doesn't mean that I don't like you or you shouldn't like me or whatever else. We just disagree on something. We're just two adults with two different opinions.
One thing that's fascinating about being alderman or the city mayor is we're at the most local level of government.
Yeah.
So
it's the most granular.
Right, granular. That's a good word. So I'm going to see someone in Kroger, right, that is going to give me their opinion, because a lot of people aren't scared to give me their opinion about particular issues. And my son may play in the same baseball team with someone, or so we're going to interact a lot more with our constituents than maybe a state senator or U.S. senator or congressman. you may never ever meet them. You're going to see Ben and I, or Natalie, or Andrew, or Doc, or Bruce, Beth. You're going to see us at different events all the time. We had the Sunset on the Square last night. I think several of them showed up to that. I mean, we're always there, and we love to hear and get your opinions. And so,
Chad, I met you for the first time at my first ribbon cutting.
that's right. Yeah, we go to ribbon cuttings.
Yeah, that's how I've built a cool friendship with Mayor Johnson.
That's all started.
He's
all
fun.
started. So I guess we'll end it there, huh? Ben's giving me that look that Shelby gives me when she's ready to go.
Ready to go. So let's try to pronounce my name again, Ben. I took the cheat sheet away.
Cheat sheet away.
Yeah, he took my cheat sheet away because I want to make sure I got his name correct. Derrick Michaud.
All right.
Yeah, look at him, man. He's
Our-
a broadcast journalism degree.
Our
man.
fantastic producer here at the Boardroom Podcast. We appreciate
In
it.
the best ward of the city, too, by the way.
Yeah, the
right?
beating heart. We call the Ward
Right?
4. Ward 4 is the beating heart of the city.
That's right, Chad. I have no complaints over here. It's a
Hey, look, we got-
well-oiled machine out here in Ward 4.
Ward 4 is a great cross section of our town. We have the downtown square where we have live music all the time. We have restaurants, and we have residential down kind of where I live in Deer Creek. It's perfect. We have the whole square area here, the downtown historic district.
Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Well, very proud.
Self-appointed, self-described greatest ward. I guess we can put it that way.
I mean, I think it is. So
It's great. It's a great area. It's a great area. Great
It's
part
a
of
lot of
town.
power. We have a state senator lives in this ward. We got Judge Chamberlain lives in, I think, Ward 5. He's across the street from us.
Well, look, I'm starting a business spotlight podcast that is for North Mississippi and Greater Memphis, but I called it Caffeine Commerce.
Okay.
I
like it.
So it's a nod to Hernando, but that cross section is synonymous. So Ward 4, right? I mean,
That's it.
So I'm putting it in history.
It's the beating heart.
There it is.
But I have trademarked it, so you can't take it.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for
Yes,
doing
sir.
this, guys, and we'll
So,
hopefully do this again someday.
Yeah, we'll finish up. So we'll be back in a couple weeks for our, I guess that's the 9th, 10th episode we'll have.
As people are listening to this is number 9.
Okay, so we'll have 10, and then we'll have a whole another 10 coming. So
we appreciate y'all listening.
Yes.
We definitely appreciate that for sure. If you have any ideas or anybody that you want to hear from, other guest speakers that you'd like to have us on, please drop it in the comments or send us a direct message on Facebook. But that will be the Boardroom Podcast with Ben Piper,
Chad Wicker.
Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you for joining us for an episode of the Boardroom Podcast, presented by People for a Better DeSoto County. I hope we were able to inform you and give you some additional insight on how your local government works. Stay engaged. Local government is the closest to the people.